Hello and welcome to Finextra. I'm Hannah Wallace, and with me now is Sean Devaney, Vice President of Strategy in Banking and Financial Markets of CGI, and we're discussing extending the ecosystem. Hello Sean, thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Hi Hannah.
So open banking, of course, is a very hot topic. Can you tell me why do you think it's so important?
Well, I think open banking is the first real initiative that we've had, certainly in the UK, to open up real competition in the market in financial services in the UK. Up until now, we've had initiatives around current account switching, we've had real-time payments in the UK, we've had various attempts to do mobile payment applications in the UK, but they were all improvements on an existing service. The difference between what we've done previously and what open banking potentially offers is that open banking is an access point for other providers to come into the market and offer innovative new solutions that just don't exist at the moment. Whereas all the other services, like account switching, for instance, just made it easier to move around the market, but they didn't drive that competition. They didn't produce the reason to move. They weren't in and of themselves a reason to increase competition in the market. Open banking has the potential to really open that up by adding new and innovative organisations to that financial services ecosystem in the UK. Organisations that are able to move much more rapidly than many of the major banks in the UK, but who are also able to offer really innovative new services that are just not available inside the banks today. But the key thing for today's implementation of open banking is the difference between how the major banks have had to implement it versus the way that some of the smaller banks have had to implement it. So as many of the audience will probably know, the open banking initiatives was originated by the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK. And they mandated that the 9 biggest banks in the UK had to open up their accounts so that third parties could access customer account and make payments on behalf of customers at a very simplistic level with consent and authentication, etc. But that doesn't cover every single bank in the UK. All the challenger banks in the UK are not part of that CMA 9 order, the Competition and Markets Authority order around open banking. And so what they've done is a number of them have managed to leapfrog the services that the CMA 9 banks are providing and are providing a much smoother and slicker service than those organisations are providing. One of the challenges we have with what open banking the CMA 9 members are doing is that the interface, the customer journey, if you like, between these slick third-party providers and what the banks themselves are providing is not a good customer journey. So the new providers are able to provide slick user experiences and smooth and intuitive applications, but then you need to be able to give authorization and consent, and that moves you into the bank world. Those customer journeys at the moment are quite clunky. Some of them require multiple screens, some of them require you to enter multiple PIN numbers and passwords and user information. They're just not a good customer journey. So you've come from this very smooth, slick offering, and then all of a sudden you're in a fairly old-fashioned and clunky authentication process, and then you're back in the nice smooth application. But so from a take-up point of view, that just doesn't offer a very good service. But if you look at what some of the challenger banks are doing, they've moved ahead of this and they're starting to offer true application-to-application interfaces, and they're starting to offer biometric security natively built into these applications so that the journey still takes you to the customer's bank. It still allows them to authenticate and give consent via their bank to access that data, which is really important. This is about customer security after all, and we want to make sure that the banks are involved in that process. But there are much slicker ways of doing it. So this is not a journey that's over. This is really the first implementation of this open banking. In March next year, there's another iteration of open banking coming out, and again further on in 2019. And by the end of 2019, it'll be a much smoother process. But I think interestingly, the way that the Competition and Markets Authority have set this up, that the 9 largest banks had to adhere to these rules, which needed to be defined with the 9 banks, and so there's a whole committee process to get that done. That's actually given some real opportunity to some of those challenger banks and some other organisations that are coming through in the market.
And of course, API management seems to be a crucial part of open banking, would you say? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the opening these services up to third parties brings its own challenges and issues for organisations, especially legacy banks that don't necessarily operate in that way today. So opening those services up without some mechanism to actually govern and control how those services are used, what types of things you're allowing third parties to see versus what you're allowing your own internal developers and service providers to see, is a key element of implementing any service around open banking, absolutely.
All right, and finally, given these challenges, what approach would you recommend for banks going forward?
So going forward, I think the important thing is that organisations understand what data it is that they are opening up to third parties. They understand how they are going to control that data and have to ensure that their customer data is safe and secure. But also, how do you understand, or what are those organisations doing to ensure that the customer journeys are robust and seamless, so that the services that you're providing to those end users and customers are as good as they possibly can be.
Wonderful. Sean, this has been great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hannah.
And thank you for watching.